In the social media application Twitter, if you go to settings and scroll down, you can set notifications so you receive new posts with a sound effect. You can also choose to turn that off. It's hard to imagine this sound effect as a catchy trend, unlike other trends that Twitter has set, like hashtags. The person who invented the hashtag was Chris Messina. In 2007, Chris was working for an internet consulting company in Silicon Valley. Twitter was brand new back then. There was some thinking about developing an organizing framework. He got the idea of using a hashtag, or pound sign as they were known at the time, from internet chat rooms that had a pound symbol in front of them. Chris pitched the idea to Twitter, but was told the idea was too nerdy. They looked silly. They'd never catch on. Chris was ready to give up, but on a whim, he asked a friend who was tweeting about a wildfire in San Diego to add hashtag San Diego Fire to his tweets. And it caught on quickly. By 2009, Twitter added an option for users to search for hashtags. By 2010, users started tagging photos with hashtags. By 2013, Saturday Night Live with Justin Timberlake and Jimmy Fallon created a weird skit.
Hey, Justin, what's up?
Not much, Jimmy. Hashtag chillin'. What's up with you?
Just been busy working. Hashtag rise and grind. Hashtag is it Friday yet?
Hey, check it out. I brought you some cookies. Hashtag homemade. Hashtag oatmeal raisin. Hashtag show me the cookie.
Sweet. Hashtag don't mind if I don't. Pretty good. Hashtag getting my cookie on. Hashtag I'm the real cookie monster. Hashtag no.
Delicious, right? Hashtag I did it all for the cookie. Hashtag LOL.
The trend blossomed eventually into more than a symbol. Hashtag Me Too. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Hashtag Make America Great Again. Hashtag Lock Her Up. What began as an effort to track metadata of tweets turned into a trendy way to see what's trending, and eventually began to be used as a versatile and perhaps galvanizing tool for change. Following trends can get a bad rap. You don't follow trends, you set them. That's what all the pop memes tell us. But in reality, we're social animals and we like to follow trends. Today on Stories and Strategies, Trends in the Communications World with hashtag Michelle Garrett. My name is Doug Downs. My guest this week is Michelle Garrett, joining us today from Columbus, Ohio. Hi again, Michelle.
Hello, Doug.
Great to have you back, and for you, the listener, welcome to Season 3. It's been a bit of space between Season 2 and Season 3. Reason for that, in part COVID, in part some personal health challenges that I had that are still in recovery, but are well underway in recovery, and then just work, which is kind of a good problem when you're overloaded with work. It takes time away from being able to do the podcast, but we're back for Season 3 and fully committed to it. So that's why you've got this strange download suddenly. I know we have quite a few followers. That's why you've got this strange download in your podcast directory today for Season 3. Michelle, you are a public relations consultant and writer. Your articles have been featured in Entrepreneur, Muckrack, Reagan's PR Daily, and more, of course. You're the host of hashtag Freelance Chat on Twitter, a co-host of hashtag PR Lunch Hour on Twitter Spaces, and a frequent speaker at events including Content Marketing World, PRSA, and a lot more. Now, and you were recently ranked as number 3 on the PR Measurement Twitter Influencer Index published by Cometric, and side by side with Ginny Dietrich, who, by the way, is our guest in our next episode. So the two of you will get to hear you side by side here on the podcast. And you were recently named one of the most influential tech PR professionals in the world, 2021, by Propel. Great to have you back, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me, Doug. I always enjoy chatting with you.
Likewise. Now, one thing about being a comms pro, Michelle, is the industry is never static. There are always changes, new trends. You've captured many of the developing trends in your December 2021 newsletter. And one of those is this working from home thing. We kind of like it, huh?
I think so. I mean, a lot of people, I'm not going to say everyone likes working from home, but I think people, who wanted to try it out have had an opportunity. I mean, that's been one side of the pandemic that may be a positive for some people. I know some people are dying to get back to the office, but I think probably more of them are really into the idea that they don't have to get in their car and commute. It saves them time. They are able to manage just their lives better when you have, you're working from home. If you have a good setup, for example, I know, some people kind of struggled with that early on when in the pandemic, but I think that a lot of people now are starting to really see the benefits of working remotely. And I heard a statistic that 1 in 7 jobs posted is now remote,
Wow.
versus 1 in 67 jobs or something like that.
And
So
that creates that whole challenge for leaders of leading staff whom they've never met. So the trend will be getting to know people virtually as well.
I think so. If you're a strong communicator, it's going to serve you really well. And I think as companies try to attract talent, playing up this idea that they will allow remote work will be a big part of that messaging. Because, I think a lot of folks at least want the option. Maybe they don't want to do it, all day, every day, but they at least want the option to be able to work from home. And I have been working long enough to remember when I had to strike out on my own and become my own boss in order to get that flexibility. So, I mean, I applaud it, and I really hope companies will, stay open to that even as we move, maybe beyond the pandemic and so forth.
Yeah, you and I both work as freelancers. I've seen the benefit of that, not just for me, but actually benefit to clients in particular in so many ways. Expertise. Also, when you hire a freelancer, they just tend to hunker down and get work done in a pretty tight time frame. But it's another growing trend, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And it's so funny because I often say that I was freelancing before it was considered cool, and now it's like everybody is looking at it. We were just talking about it on Twitter this morning. People are just tired of toxic workplaces and bad bosses. And I think that, we can see, if you look at statistics, you could see the growth in freelancing. I'm kind of curious to see if it will stay that way and continue to grow, or if it will kind of even out, as we move forward here. But I mean, for me, I just think it makes so much sense, just for my life. I have kids. I started out when my kids were before my kids were born, and now they're teenagers, but it's a really great flexible, lifestyle. And then it's also great for the clients because, I don't know about you, but I worked at an agency before I went out on my own, and a lot of clients were being charged, a lot of money because we had a fancy office and,
Yes.
so I just think it makes a lot of sense for both sides.
So that's interesting. Do you think the trend will be more toward those agencies that still exist and can do some really good work
Mhm.
sometimes, or more toward mom and pop isn't really the right phrase here, but
Mhm.
the smaller freelance individual operations, the solopreneurs.
Mhm. Well, what I've seen, and I have been a part of some of these teams as well, are freelancers kind of collaborating, coming together
Uh-huh.
to work for clients, like bigger clients, for example. You can put together a team of freelancers and, you can work that on a number of ways. They don't have to subcontract for, one person. You might be able to just go in on a project together. And, that can work for clients too, because I think I never want to say anything, really negative about agencies because there's a need for them, right? I mean, there's a different scenario for which those are probably a better fit
That's
for
right.
bigger companies. And, I used to work for Adobe. I think they probably had 3 agencies or more, at the same time. So, in some cases, you need a big team, and there are things that an agency brings that maybe a team of freelancers may not be able to bring, but I think that gap is closing. I mean, we have access to the same tools and technology now. I feel like it's just a good option to keep in mind if you're looking at an agency, if you're doing an agency search, maybe think about freelancers to supplement that or even to take the place of it.
Right. Another trend, and this has been going on from day one, I would suppose, is writing. Strong writing will continue to be in demand. It really is the metaphorical equivalent to blood flow for communications, isn't it? I mean, here we're doing a podcast, you and I, but this podcast episode started with writing.
Well, yes, and you do a great job of that, I will say, Doug, as far as preparing.
That's what I wrote for you to say. That's good. Yeah.
Preparing for the podcast. Not everyone does that, so I kudos to you for that. And of course, the strength of your writing comes through in that communication. And to me, writing is a cornerstone of everything communicators do. Good writers can be really hard to find, and I cannot emphasize the importance of it enough for those entering the communications or PR field. I always talk about it when I give talks to college classes, for example, and things like that. I'm always talking about writing, and I know they probably get maybe tired of hearing about it, but it just couldn't be stressed enough, because as much as we do talk about it, if you look at what agencies are hiring for, looking for, employers are looking for, it is continually in the top, the list of the top skills they look for, but the ones that are hardest to find. Seth Godin says that writing is a symptom of thinking, and I really like that, because I feel like if you are able to bring your thoughts to the page, it just helps you work through so many things, and it's really just shows that you are a thinker. And I think that's, every employer would want that. Every client, every employer.
Have you worked with comms pros, senior or junior, who they're just not good writers? And were they successful in spite of it, or was that really their Achilles heel?
Well, I think yes, I have seen that. It kind of shocks me sometimes. Even I would say beyond like newer, younger pros. I mean, I see it across all kinds of channels. Even in professional publications, there's writing that's confusing. There are typos.
Yes.
It's really, there's so much more content now. I think that's part of the problem, or part of the issue, is that we see more mistakes because there is more content. But I notice it, and I think another problem there is that they've laid off the copy editors. That's one of the first things I remember when I worked in a corporate job. Even when we had a round of layoffs, we had an editor in the PR department, and she reviewed everything we did, and that was the first person they laid off. And I'm like, that person's really valuable. Like, no matter if you are able to hire strong writers, you still really need somebody to look that copy over and make it better, and catch mistakes, because mistakes are expensive. They can be, and we've seen like confusing communication. We've seen the issues that it causes. I think, not to keep talking about the pandemic, but, I know here in the United States, the CDC is getting a lot of, taking a lot of heat, and because, it's not, it's a complicated issue, but part of the problem has been just the lack of clear communication. So I just feel like this doesn't get enough attention, and it really we can't focus on it enough, really.
And sometimes in the course of my work, someone brings up that old myth about 93% of communications is nonverbal, as in not to do with the words at all. And I have to think, here's why that's a myth. We would have evolved into mimes if that were the case.
Right.
At the same time with the writing, another trend is that audio and video continue to rise. Now, as a podcaster, I'm most pleased with that.
Yes. Well, and another beyond podcasts, Twitter Spaces has been such a great way for me to explore audio. I don't have my own podcast. Which, it's kind of a lack of time, and I know it takes a ton of work. And so, but Twitter Spaces has kind of allowed me to explore that a little bit. And I really would encourage folks to check it out if they have not. I know some people maybe started out on Clubhouse. I kind of waited a little bit, and then I saw that Twitter was launching, its own, Clubhouse-like feature with
It's app,
Spaces, and
yeah.
so that's kind of where I, jumped on board.
I got when Clubhouse was emerging as all the rage. Of course, I was all jealous because it's a VIP thing, right? You had to have an invitation. I got one eventually. I was excited because I'm really pro audio, obviously, and I spent so first few hours I enjoyed it. Hey, there's a lot of audio there, and within a week or so, I must say, and this is just my experience, I was bored with Clubhouse. I
Mhm.
haven't dabbled with Twitter Spaces yet.
Well, every Friday I'm co-host of a space called PR Lunch Hour. It's at noon Eastern on Friday,
Right.
and we invite everybody to tune in, and we give you the mic if you have something to share, and we talk about wins, we talk about PR fails of the week, we talk about hot topics, and it's been a really I can't say how pleasantly surprised I have been by that experience. So definitely something to kind of keep an eye on and check out.
Why audio? Why are we attracted to audio? Is it because we're simply inundated with writing, newsletters, blogs, websites, my God, emails?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I think, enjoy listening or watching. I am a reader. And so personally, I prefer to read, and that is my go-to, but I know that I am probably in the minority. And, I feel like it, there is a lot on both, I mean, of all the content of written, audio, video, there's a lot. So I still feel like to stand out in any, you know, platform, you kind of have to have those unique opinions that you share, and you have to be able to start conversations and be able to contribute to conversations. And that's kind of the secret sauce.
Hmm.
And for clients, I just really suggest that they do some research before they invest their time or budget into any channel, because otherwise they're just kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall. They're just going to see what sticks, and that's, I guess it could work if you get lucky, but it could also waste a lot of your time and money if you haven't really done your research.
Right. And then video, it's not actually a news story. It's just so captivating. It really is trying to harness a lot of my senses at the same time.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And I get bored after maybe a minute if it's not really, really good.
Yeah, I feel like, we look at TikTok and see, the short videos, of course, are
Yes.
very, very popular, and that platform has risen very quickly to the top of the heap there. But, for example, I worked briefly with a client who had launched a podcast, but they didn't really do any research to understand what their objectives were, what their audience was looking for. They just thought, oh, everybody's doing a podcast, so let's just do a podcast. And of course, it's expensive. They paid to have it professionally produced, and um, this I I kind of found I was brought in after the fact, and so I was kind of like, wow, okay. I don't know, we'll have to see how this works out, but I think it was, it was, they it was clear that it was not well thought out. And that's
Hmm.
just the point that I would make, is that even with TikTok, I don't think everybody needs to hop on TikTok either. So
Right.
just think about it and do your research and focus. I mean, for heaven's sakes, don't try to do every single thing on every single platform. I think that's, where a lot of businesses fall down, especially small businesses. I see that with my clients, and it's just hard to do it all and do it really well.
Crisis communications. I guess March 2020, all of a sudden, every PR pro around the world hung a shingle as a crisis expert. Um, Everybody seemed to know a lot about it, but the main message was you got to be prepared. There was a lot of that talk. We're 2 years into this now. Isn't that amazing? We're
Hmm.
2 years into this chapter of the Earth's life. And are we living up to that promise? Are companies going, or are they building and planning for crisis communications as we all said we would back in March 2020?
I think that was a big wake up call, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember, before that, going into meetings that were, I'd be talking to a prospective client about, a product launch or PR effort of some kind, and I would kind of, in the course of the meeting, mention, crisis communications. Do you have a plan? Have you thought about it? And they would look at me like, why? Why would we? Like they were confused about why they would need one. And I think now we see every business really needs to have at least a basic crisis communications plan in place. Like who would be the team that would be, called immediately to talk through it. You need somebody from PR, you need somebody from legal, of course you're going to have the C-suite involved, you're going to have HR, you need to have the basics at least thought out, and then you need to revisit that every so often to make sure that based on whatever the current circumstances are, that you have that up to date, and like if people have left, or just need to have all the updated information, phone numbers, email, whatever it needs to be in there. Because if you don't, and you're left kind of like in the lurch there, it can really be detrimental if you're not ready to react and respond. And we just know that every company has been, affected by the pandemic, for example. So, you really just need to think about those things.
Right. And as long as COVID is in the headlines or even the sub headlines, then I can see companies following through on that. But let me ask you, the minute it's not in the paper, figuratively, the
Mhm.
minute it's not in those headlines, is that one of the places companies cut? I mean, why spend money on
Mhm.
crisis comms when it's not popping up every day?
That's a good point. I, in my for my business, I don't, you know, count on that piece of
Right.
it to, pay the bills necessarily. To me, it's usually an add-on, because if a client gets in touch with me and they're already in a crisis situation, that's a whole different story. That's a different can of worms. So I feel like, it'll be interesting to see what they do, but I do think that this has really put an emphasis on it. And I mean, even looking at like issues like inflation or the supply chain, I mean, that's created some crises for businesses that were not expecting it. I have clients in the manufacturing sector, for example, to produce products for customers, they need stuff. They are affected by the supply chain slowdowns or bottlenecks, or whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
So I think it's going to cause companies to think differently about a lot of things, and hopefully they understand that just having just a holding statement, and just even the basics. I think that's just
Yeah.
important. And every consultant and agency should really be reminding clients about that.
And know the process and best practices. Last trend, measurement, has always been important, but you feel this is a trend that's going to move toward a more holistic view of how we conduct measurement.
Hmm. Yes, I interviewed Jonna Burke. She is with the International Association for Measurement and Evaluation of Communication, which is
Yeah.
a long title. It's the AMEC for short. And I talked with her and wrote an article for Muck Rack about measurement, because it's something I think that we as PR pros can struggle with, and kind of proving our value. And I think a lot of times we kind of get left holding the bag. If something, if a campaign falls flat or something isn't successful, well, her point was that we really need to think about, first of all, what are we measuring and why are we measuring it? And then, kind of ladder up to a larger objective. It's not just PR out here as an island on its own. There are more pieces and parts in any campaign, hopefully. I mean, usually I think we can agree on that. But but her point was one that I've kind of kept in mind, because I think sometimes we're, as PR pros, afraid or hesitant to question, why are we doing this? Exactly what is the goal here? So I think just thinking more strategically, thinking like that, instead of just like being the the person they call and, okay, go write this press release. Well, why? Like, what are we trying to get out of it? And what do we need to include in it? And how are we going to measure? Are we going to put a link, a specific link that then we can see how many people clicked the link? Or, what are we going to put in place to make sure we can measure the effectiveness of this effort?
Wonderful. And Michelle, absolutely great to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Doug. This is, a lot of fun for me. So thank you.
Likewise. If you'd like to send a message to my guest, Michelle Garrett, you can email her at michelle@michellegarrett.com. It's also in the show notes. Her new website is one of the links in the show notes as well. So is Michelle's Twitter handle. By the way, you continue to be awesome on Twitter, and now you've got credentials, accreditation that shows you are. You're one of the good voices. You can also participate in hashtag freelance chat, which you host, Michelle, as well as co-host of hashtag PR lunch hour. Those hashtag chats, what do I call them? They're becoming that's another trend, isn't it?
It really is. I hope that people aren't sleeping on Twitter. I see more people kind of catching on to Twitter. And I think if you're in PR, you don't really have a good excuse not to at least check it out, because there are a lot of reporters on there. That's the reason I first, started to, participate in Twitter, but it's become a lot more than that. So yes.
Absolutely. Stories and Strategies is a co-production of JGR Communications and Podcasts That Pop. We're hoping you might leave a rating for this podcast on either Apple or Spotify. Reviews are also very welcome, and you can connect with us on Twitter at comms_podcast. We're also on Instagram. More than anything else, if you liked this episode, would you do us a favor and tell just one friend? Thanks for listening.